Star Wars: The Heart of the Jedi by Kenneth C. Flint. Chapter 4. They all turned to Luke with looks of astonishment. "What do you mean?" a disconcerted Leia asked him. "Of course I want you with me." He shook his head. "You don't need me. I'd just be in the way." "You wouldn't," she protested. "How can you say that?" His reply was calmly reasoning. "Because it's true. I'm no diplomat, Leia. That's your skill. I'm still just a farm boy from a backward planet on the fringe of the galaxy. I never got the education or experience you did. I just ran off with Ben Kenobi, and here I am." "But you could still go," Leia argued. "You could learn." Luke cut her off. "Sorry, Leia," he said in a heavy way. "I'm really just not up to it right now. To tell the truth, I'm feeling kind of tired." He got to his feet, his expression giving evidence of a great weariness, and of an old forlornness, too. Solo began to rise as well, holding out a hand. "Luke?" Leia held up her own hand in a restraining way. "No," she said firmly. "Let him go if it's what he wants." Han settled back, though reluctantly. Luke gave his sister a small, grateful smile. "Thanks. I figured you'd understand. I'm going now. May the Force be with you." He looked around to the little droid. "R2, you come with me." The droid squeaked an answer and obediently rolled after him as he moved away towards the door. The others, still at a loss over his strange attitude, looked after him. As the sliding door whooshed closed behind him, Han turned to Leia. "How can you just let him go like that?" he demanded accusingly. "Something's wrong with the kid." "What's wrong with my brother is his own affair," she replied quietly. Han was plainly confounded by the seeming callousness on her part. "Yeah, but—" he began. "General Solo," she said in a firm and formal way, "the peace of the galaxy is our only concern now. If you mean to use the Falcon, shouldn't you be seeing that the ship is prepared?" That threw Solo even more aback. He started, then his face drew into a scowl at the somewhat curt dismissal. "Oh, well, sure," he returned with sarcasm in his tones. "At your command, your majesty." He rose and gestured to his comrades. "Come on, guys. Let's us peasants go get our hands dirty." He flashed her resentful look. "And leave the rest to the nobility." He stalked away, followed by his companions. Of their little band, only Leia remained behind. She watched him go out of the room with a look of annoyance. Mon Mothma leaned towards her and smiled. "You have an interesting bond with General Solo." "I suppose," was Leia's exasperated reply. "It's just that Han can be so difficult at times." "That woman can be a real pain," Han Solo was meantime proclaiming just outside as he led his friends into an elevator. The glass car began its ascent towards the hangar level. C-3PO spoke up defensively. "The princess has a great many responsibilities, Master Solo. As a leading member of the Provisional Council for the Transitioning Alliance of Free Planets, the burgeoning New Republic..." Han wheeled on him. "If I want your opinion, Goldenrod, I'll ask for it." "Of course, sir," 3PO hastened to assure him in a contrite manner. The elevator slowed to a halt at the hangar floor. Its door hummed open. "She does have a lot on her plate, Han," put in Wedge as they stepped out. "And with this new treaty with the former Imperial Senate, she'll have even more to worry about." "Maybe," Han said grudgingly. "Anyway, I got worries of my own. So where is she, Wedge?" Wedge pointed off across the hangar floor. "That way, Repair Bay 3. Han headed off towards it at a quick pace, the others falling in around him. As they walked, he mused aloud, clearly still much irked. "I'd just like to show Miss High and Mighty she's not the only intellect around here. I've got some ideas, too." Chewbacca responded to that, his grunts and growls undoubtedly a question. "Like what?" Han translated with some indignation. "Like where they can hold this little meeting of theirs, for one. Might be I can teach her worship something there." One might almost believe you two were in some One might almost believe you two were in some type of competition, sir," 3PO ventured timidly. "Her and me?" Solo gave a belittling hoot of laughter. "No contest at all. We're real pals." walls. They reached a wide rectangular opening in the side wall of the main room, and passed through it into the repair bay. This was a smaller but still spacious area lined with complex equipment, shelves of parts, and racks of tools. Solo stopped abruptly as they came in, the others pulling up behind. He stared ahead with a look of blended deep relief and great pleasure. Before him, filling much of the bay, sat the familiar horn saucer shape of the Millennium Falcon. Squatting on the 3 broad pads of its landing gear, boarding ramp down while a swarm of men in overalls crawled into, under, and on top of her. Brightly lit by the beams from banks of work lamps, the much-abused craft looked most uncharacteristically clean. The trail of rust and scorch marks from blaster hits had been scoured away, and her hull had a soft, smooth sheen from being newly buffed. Most of the workmen seemed to be engrossed in final, minor loose-end operations, vacuuming the folding ramp, tightening bolts, polishing glass. 3 of them worked on the forward top hull to fit a broad communications dish into position on its swiveled mounting. "There she is," Han said, drinking in the sight. Then with great sincerity he added, "I never saw anything look so good." He walked forward slowly, the others following. They moved up under the curve of the lower hull to the front landing gear. Han ran a caressing hand down it, murmuring affectionately, "How are you, girl? You know, there was a time I thought I'd never see you again." "They've been working hard on her," supplied Wedge, "getting her back in shape." "Uh-huh," Han replied noncommittally, his eyes scanning her underbelly critically. "We'll see." A man whose clean, crisply pressed overalls said supervisor came over to them. He was a dapper little fellow with a neatly curled mustache and spoke in a clipped way. "General Solo." Han turned to him. "That's right. I'm Higgins, crew chief here. We've had a time of it, getting this old girl back into shipshape, I can tell you." "Really?" "Oh yes, hard to find a comm dish for a buggy so obsolete. Quite sure you wouldn't want to trade her in for something a bit more up-to-date?" "Not a chance, Chief," Han assured. He patted the ship. "This lady's got a lot of good years left. When she goes to the scrap pile, it'll be with my carcass still at the controls." The man shrugged and cracked a little smile. "As you will, General. Well, she's nearly ready now. Refit, and as near as new as we can make her." "I think I'll just see about that for myself," Han told him skeptically. He looked to the Wookiee. "Chewie, let's check her out." Snowball, not sure about when I'll try a stream on reality. It's not exactly a high priority at the moment, unfortunately. The repair crew was gone. The Millennium Falcon sat unattended, save for only 2 figures working on her top hull. The immense, hairy form of Chewbacca knelt on the hull, a toolbox open beside him. Below the Wookiee, Han Solo stood up to his waist in one of the engineering access cavities. Both were more than a bit disheveled and soiled from a good period of hard work, which was continuing diligently now. Chewbacca watched as Solo fiddled with some thick bundle of wires. "They seem okay," he muttered. He called into a small hand intercom. "Hey, Professor, you there?" Inside the Falcon's cockpit, C-3PO sat in the pilot's seat. He punched his intercom button, calling back. "Yes, Master Solo?" "Check the motivator circuit on the HK firing cells, will ya?" Han's voice commanded. "Yes, sir." The droid leaned forward and flipped a switch on the control panel back and forth several times. "Turn this dial, toggle that circuit, fetch this 3PO, fix that 3PO, shut up 3PO, he groused to himself. "One would think that such a menial lot was all we were made for." On top of the ship, Solo was touching a circuit tester to the leads, noting its needle jumping. "That seems okay too," he remarked. "But I better check on that transducer coupling again." He got down on his knees and crawled in under the overhanging lip of the hull. He said appraisingly. "A little loose, Chewie. Hand me that number 5 hydro spanner, okay?" The Wookiee shuffled through the box, taking out the wrench-like tool and handed it down. Solo's hand came into view as he took it and carried it from sight. The staccato clicks of ratcheting began. While it went on, the waiting Chewie lifted his head and gazed around him idly. But his gaze was caught, and he stared fixedly. Through the door of the bay and out across the main hangar floor, he had sighted a small figure in an orange suit making its way through the bustling throng. Chewie gazed more intensely, sharp eyes focusing. There was no doubt. The figure was that of Luke Skywalker, clad in a flight suit, and the unmistakable barrel form of R2-D2 was closely trailing him. Still watching, Chewie growled out a terse statement. The still laboring Han's reply from the hole was brusque. "You see, Luke? Yeah, so what?" Chewie growled again with more urgency. This time it jerked Solo upright in a small space. "Leaving? Ow!" he said as his skull sharply contacted the hole above. He quickly crawled into the open and stood rubbing the sore spot as he looked irritatedly around. Chewie pointed a long arm. Han's gaze followed it, and he stared. Across the hangar, Luke had now reached a parked X-Wing and was looking it over, while R2 stood by. "That's him, all right," an astonished Han proclaimed. He clambered from the hole and handed his tool to the Wookiee. "Here, Chewie, keep at it. I'm going to see what this is all about." And with that, he began to climb down from the Falcon's hull. Across the hangar, meanwhile, Luke had finished his ship inspection and was now watching two men hook the suction-like lifter end of a Magna crane line to the round top of R2's form. With it firmly attached, word was given, and the crane began to lift. As the droid rose from the floor, Luke turned away and he picked up a white flight helmet. He was inspecting its inside when Han reached him. "Hey, kid," the older man called. "What's going on?" Luke looked up to see him. He smiled, but in a distant, distracted way. "Oh, hi, Han," he answered vaguely. "Things seem so quiet now. The war on hold and everything. I just felt restless. Got to get away somewhere." "Well, if you got an itch to do something, you can still come with us," Han suggested. Luke shook his head. "No, I think what I need is to be alone for a while." Han eyed him searchingly for a moment, then moved closer. "Look, this old Han, remember? We've been through a lot together. I mean, I may not have the Force, but I can sure feel when there's something eating at you. You can tell me," he added coaxingly. Luke met his gaze squarely, face tightening into hard lines. "Maybe that's it, Han," he said with force. "I'm not a kid anymore." A rueful note came into his voice. "I lost that part of me a few years ago, when I left home on Tatooine. Lost it pretty fast, too, as I recall." "Hey, we've all lost a lot in this," Han said sympathetically. "Me, Chewie, Leia. That's the way war is." "It's not the same," Luke retorted. "You'd all been out there, a part of it before. You were all tough. Even Leia. I never had any of that on Tatooine. I was just a dumb kid." He considered. "In a lot of ways, I suppose that I still am, except with this power in me that I don't fully understand." He shook his head violently, as if he would like to cast it out, then declared with some despair, "I've just got to get away." "You can't run from it, Luke," Han said firmly. "I'm not running," Luke told him. "I'm trying to find something. Some answers, maybe." He looked to Han with urgent appeal. "Can you understand that?" Solo considered his friend with unusual gravity for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, kid. Luke, I guess I can understand. We all get to have doubts about who we are sometimes. I just didn't like seeing you go off alone this way. He hesitated over the difficult mission. "Oh, hell, I was worried about you." Luke smiled and put a hand on Solo's shoulder. "Thanks for that," he said warmly. "But I'll be okay, Han. Really. I just need a little time to sort things out, that's all." A ground crewman came up to them. "We've got your droid all loaded, Commander Skywalker," he announced. Luke looked around from Solo and nodded acknowledgement to the man. "Thanks." He slipped on his helmet and clasped hands with his old friend. "I'll see you soon," Luke assured. "I promise." "May the Force be with you," Han replied, with feeling. Luke turned away and moved to the ladder of his ship. While he began to climb, Han backed away out of the landing circle and stood watching the younger man until he had settled into the cockpit. Despite Luke's assurance, Han's face showed his misgivings as he watched the canopy come down and the X-Wing begin to lift from the floor on its repulsor lift drive. The ship was sliding away before the directing lights of a deck signalman when Han became aware of another figure beside him. He looked around to see that it was Leia, also staring intently after the departing ship. "Luke's taken off for somewhere," he supplied. "I know," she replied. She looked to him, her eyes taking in his troubled expression. "There was nothing you could do," she soothingly explained. "I can feel the turmoil in him. It's been growing for some time. He's got to resolve it himself, Han. You can't help him with it, only he can find the way." His probing gaze met hers. His voice was grim. "What if that way leads to the dark side?" To this, she gave no answer, but as her gaze shifted back to the X-Wing, just slipping out the main hangar door, a glint of mixed hope and worry shone in her eyes. Outside the door, the X-Wing was already activating its main engines and streaking away. It angled up and across the rocky landscape as it accelerated, in seconds shooting from the hazy envelope of atmosphere and entering the black crystal clarity of space. As the ship rapidly pierced deeper into the star-swept dark, the young man in its cockpit checked his instruments. From its own cozy port behind the cockpit, the little droid peered and whistled to him. Its sounds showed up as a readable symbol scrolling across the cockpit screen. Luke read them and answered. "You want a destination, R2? He considered. Then he spoke the single word. "Home." The ship blinked and blasted away into space, leaving the gray-white marble of the planet behind. But as it did, a second X-Wing came suddenly into view, slicing up out of the planet's atmosphere. Within its cockpit sat another pilot in an orange flight suit, but wearing a metallic blue helmet instead. He consulted his laser tracking scope, noting the blip of the other fighter ahead. The pilot nodded with satisfaction and nudged his thruster control full on. The X-Wing flashed forward, banking to take up a position dead in the other fighter's wake, but a very safe distance behind.